What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. It's Thursday, time to go game by game, talk about all the players I'd be starting and sitting this week. First up, we've got the Thursday night game, Steelers at Browns. This game has a very low 36.5 point total. Steelers 3.5 point road favorites. Keep an eye on the weather in this one. Kevin Roth over at Roto Grinders, that's like the best source for weather. Just basically check the forecast before the game. It's going to be cold, not freezing, but it's going to be cold. There's likely going to be some like rain, snow mix, but the biggest factor is wind. And as of recording this, we kind of can't know exactly where that's going to be. If it's windy on top of being cold and kind of like, that like rain, snow mix, that's going to be pretty terrible news for the passing game. It's going to impact scoring. Note that that's already being taken into account by the total. So try your best to not like double count it, right? If the total drops to like 35, we see a ton of wind. Don't look at a projection and say, okay, I'm going to dock like 3 points from the projection. The projection, if you're using a good site, not really like the, basic like ESPN Sleeper, they're probably not taking into account the weather, but you're looking at a good projection source, they're probably already taking into account that. So don't double count it by dropping it, because again, the total kind of reflects that. But total doesn't reflect always like run pass splits. And so if we do see elevated win totals, and it's like looking really bad, I am going to boost up the projected rushing attempts and projected like rushing split for each team. That's going to downgrade passing, increase rushing, but in a way, it's like kind of almost neutral for rushing, because if we expect the total to drop, we expect more rushing. That means fewer plays overall, less efficiency. Still not a good thing for the rushing attack. So all of this is to say, it's not a good spot. If you've got a 50-50 between a player in this game and a player on Sunday, Monday, you might want to lean towards that other player. But again, we'll go over this one. I went in depth in the weather in this one. It's the only spot this week where it's bad. I think the Giants game has a little bit of wind, but this is the only spot where it's like, pay attention to weather here. Don't worry about it too much for other games unless something pops up again. I just go to Roto Grinders, look at their like NFL weather. Kevin Roth does that, does a good job. Just check that each week. So for the Steelers, Najee is the best play because he's kind of, it doesn't really matter what the weather is. Like, they're going to utilize him a ton, especially if it's, a more run heavy game. It just benefits him to some degree, just kind of like adding on a baseline for touches. And on a really thin week, and you hear me say this a lot, 6 teams on bye, you're looking at production at running back 2, or you're looking at like production for running back in terms of like probably going to get over 12 touches. They're pretty much like a locked in running back too. So I would definitely play Najee this week. Warren should mix in for like 10 to 14 maybe touches, but he has a pretty low chance of scoring. The Browns are a negative matchup for running backs. His most likely range is like 5 to 10 half PPR points. Makes him a pretty low end flex play this week. Wide receiver, only considering George Pickens, but he's just a low end wide receiver too. Right now, I do have docs for the passing attack, and he's been wide receiver 17. That would make him not a must play, but a very strong play. If things look bad, he probably drops to closer to like wide receiver 25, but with, again, 6 teams on bye, you probably just have to play George Pickens this week. But again, this is not a good spot. And I really would not really consider Russell Wilson. Like, he's already many times on the fringes given passing volume. If we're going to project more rushing, we're going to project, less efficiency through the air, less total touchdowns, it's not a spot where I want to play Russell Wilson. Then for the Browns, very similar story, but add on that Pittsburgh also has a very, very strong defense. They're projected to score less than 17 points for a reason. It's not a good spot for the Browns. We've seen really, really good passing, like elite passing volume for this team since Winston took over, but I would use some caution this week. All 3 wide receivers are really just flex plays, and honestly more lower end flex plays. It's just the volume. Again, the volume is just a problem mixed with matchup. It is a terrible matchup. Even if the weather was perfect, the Steelers are not a team want to roll out a bunch of wide receivers again, so not a good spot for this passing attack this week. Chubb, Ford, they're kind of splitting this. Like, Chubb gets all the early down work. Ford will mix in for some early down and then some reception. So that limits both of their upside. Again, not even projected to score 17 points this week, so not great. And Njoku is really the only Browns player you can feel good about. But on a tough week, if you had to play Chubb running back 2, that's fine. If you had to play Judy in the flex, Tillman in the flex, Moore in like the wide receiver 3 second flex spot, fine, but don't expect great games from these guys. And you typically don't want to play anyone in the flex. So if you're going to start these guys on Thursday, just play them at the position where they actually are. So don't actually play Chubb or Ridley or Judy in the flex spot. Put them at running back, put them at wide receiver. Give yourself more flexibility if there's out or players out on Sunday. Okay, on to Sunday games. That was a lot for just the Thursday game. We'll start off with the Bucs at the Giants. 41.5 point total. Bucs 1 point road favorites right now. I think that line will move closer to 2.5, maybe. I don't know. It just feels a little bit like why would the Bucs coming off bye, likely getting Evans back? Why are they only 1 point road favorites? But they are. Again, this is the only other spot where there's potentially some win, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. For the Bucs, seems like, again, Evans will return. That's obviously very good news for the offense, unless we get word that there's some sort of snap count. They come out and they're like, okay, he's willing to play 20 snaps. At that point, you're like, okay, they're probably going to use him in those 20. He probably has a red zone role, but 20 snaps is not ideal. Maybe bench him at that point. Other than that, start Mike Evans this week. And I think you're starting Baker too. He's been playing absolutely fantastic. Now he gets Mike Evans back. The ceiling is very clear in this spot. Tough matchup for Cade Otton. His target share is obviously going to drop with Mike Evans back, but I think you kind of just keep rolling with him this week. So I would say Baker, Evans, Cade, they're must starts for me. Bucky and Rachaad White are really good plays at running back too. I don't think they're going to finish as top 5 running backs, but I do think the Bucs win this week. I think it's a good matchup on the ground. I think them utilizing more of a 2 running back committee now makes sense. I just think both are going to get enough volume to where slide them into running back 2, you'll feel pretty good about that decision. Then for the Giants, there's really only 2 players you're looking at, Malik Neighbors, Tyron Tracy Jr. Both should be in starting lineups in all formats. Beyond them, I don't really want to stream Tommy DeVito. Maybe on a site like DK if you want to use him like a cash lineup. I think he's like 4K. Sure. Other than DFS lineups, for you to trust him outside of a 16-team league, no. Again, people might want to because the matchup is really good. The Bucs are not a very good defense, but I wouldn't want to stream him. Theo Johnson, he's playing a ton of snaps. Again, good matchup, but the targets need to be more consistent before I want to start him. That basically leaves you, if you're, again, not starting, obviously you're starting Neighbors, you're starting Tyron Tracy Jr. The other plays, it basically only leaves you with Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. So I suppose you could use one of these two if you needed to. Again, 6 teams on bye, and these guys are in good matchups. Maybe DeVito elevates past what Daniel Jones was doing. The Wan'Dale runs 5 yards downfield. Slayton hasn't really done much in games that Neighbors is active. So I think both are playable. Neither project as really starting options, but if you had to go there, they're not awful. They'll have some sort of usage. Next up, we have Lions at Colts, 50.5 point total, very high total game. Lions 7.5 point road favorites. For the Lions, as per usual, start everyone. Even though what the Jets did last week against the Colts, they only ran 52 plays, even factoring that in, the Colts are still allowing the second most opponent plays per game. We know when Anthony Richardson's a starting quarterback, they are much more explosive. And so not only do you kind of elevate turnovers as well, but you elevate the chance that he hits A.D. Mitchell or he hits Alec Pierce on a 70-yard touchdown. Well, that puts your offense right back on the field on the other side. So when your Lions offense, that can be very, very scary. Lions also projected to score just under 30 this week. Very real chance. Again, that's an average projection of around 30. Like we saw last week when they were on average projected for 30, they can score 50. I don't know if they'll score 50 again, but this is such a good team that it's just play their guys. Goff, Gibbs, Monty, St. Brown, all must starts. I'm assuming Laporta returns this week, has no limitations, but if he doesn't, it just makes everyone a stronger play, but it doesn't make the backup tight ends, other fringe options. It doesn't really elevate them all that much. Everyone just gets a little bit. I would say if Laporta does play, I'd feel good about starting to. I don't know that I'd call him a must start given his usage this season, but he'd be a good play at tight end. And then Jameson Williams, only one you're really considering, but projects him a wide receiver 17 this week. A great boom bust play in the flex. Just when in doubt, play a Lions player. Then for the Colts side, AR had his best game of the season, and believe it or not, he had the best accuracy game of any quarterback all season on passes, 10 or more yards downfield. He was honestly just incredible last week, and he lowered his ADOT and he got the ball out quicker, right? He didn't force that deep ball like he kind of been doing before. He took everything that was available short, and then when it was available downfield, he took that and he was highly accurate. Still missed a few throws, still wasn't, the greatest quarterback of all time out there, and the pendulum could easily swing back in the other direction this week. So it was a very positive sign for Anthony Richardson, but that was his 11th career start in the NFL. He played one season of starting quarterback in college. He's still developing. He could still go back to these traits that frustrate us, and just watching these games being like, what on earth are you doing? We could still be saying that this week against a very good Lions defense. Through 7 starts this season, Richardson has yet to face a below average defense. Every single week has been above average defense. That is the same this week. The Lions rank 2nd in EPA per play allowed. They force the lowest efficiency through the air. As I've mentioned for weeks now, technically, it grades out as a positive matchup for wide receivers just because you can't run on the Lions and they kind of shut down tight end production. So everything gets funneled to wide receivers. So even though they're still very efficient at they're forcing very low efficiency to wide receivers and just this passing attack in general, there's so much volume that gets pushed to wide receivers that even with low efficiency, they still produce better in fantasy. That being said, we know the Lions are going to put up points. We know this game is in a dome. We know the total is very high. We know both teams are very explosive. We know JT is probably going to struggle on the ground. So even if Anthony Richardson is inefficient, as long as he does not get injured or benched, he should have a really good game. And it'd be pretty unlikely they bench him unless it's like, they're down by 30 points. He's got 3 interceptions and a fumble. He looks absolutely terrible. At that point, you weren't getting there anyways with Anthony Richardson when you started him, so you're not too worried about that. They're not going to pull the plug unless it's really, really bad. Right now, he grades out as like a fringe top 10 quarterback. JT's been running back 13. Again, bad matchup. You have to play Jonathan Taylor. Downs, wide receiver 23. Pittman, Pierce, basically just low-end flex plays. There is definitely upside. Again, most targets in the league to wide receivers allowed when you consider schedule adjusted there. They're going to get volume. Like, there's going to be volume to these wide receivers. They're going to push the ball downfield. They're going to play fast. And we know the other side is going to score points. So it's like, there's upside here. There's just floor. So understand that with all Colts players this week. Can be a positive, though, when you think about it, right? Like, many people need that upside this week. They need players because they have so many people on bye. You need someone with some sort of ceiling. Colts players do offer that this week. Titans at Texans is up next. 41.5 point total. Texans 8.5 point home favorites. For the Titans, the Texans are best attacked through the air, not on the ground. So it's more likely to be a Ridley game than a Pollard game. We will see if Spears is able to play, though. He's in the concussion protocol right now. Pollard has been pretty bad in recent weeks, and it's a poor matchup. So I'm really not in love with either running back. Definitely not Spears, but I'm not in love with either running back if Spears is active. But if Spears is out, we go back to seeing Pollard as close to a feature running back. He would probably be a must start if that were the case. So watch the status on Spears, but the best play on the Titans is Ridley. I'd feel pretty good about using him in the flex spot. Behind him, it's not that great. You can't count on a Nick Westbrook-Akine touchdown every week or a busted long play as well, and they don't really use their tight ends enough. So Pollard, Ridley, only two I have really any interest in this week. Then for the Texans, this is a really poor matchup for wide receivers. The Titans are still allowing the fewest passing yards per game in the NFL. They're top 8 in limiting wide receiver yards per reception and catch rate. It's not a good spot for the passing attack. So I'm not expecting this to be the game where they bounce back. Because again, the Texans have not been that great this season. Obviously, a big portion of that is, well, Nico's been missing a chunk of time. And when your superstar wide receiver is out, and your other star wide receiver towards ACL, it's a little bit difficult to move the ball on offense. So I don't think everything is on Stroud. He's not playing as well as last season, but I don't think everything is on Stroud this season. But he's still not playing that great. And again, it's not a spot where I expect them to bounce back. So you're playing Mixon, you're playing Nico. It doesn't matter who they're playing there. Dell is fine. I think given the week, he's probably a flex play. But if you have a really good team or you're lucky and like you don't have the buys this week, I don't think Dell is like that good of a play. So I would prefer not to have to play him. And I would prefer also not to play CJ Stroud. Next up, we've got Patriots at Dolphins, 46-point total. Dolphins, 7.5-point home favorites. For the Patriots, May's been playing really well, and that's been translating to the skill players. This is really only a good matchup for the running backs, but on a thin week, I know some people in more like deeper formats are kind of looking for fringe plays this week. My rankings right now for Patriots players are May, quarterback 16, Stevenson, running back 16, Hunter Henry, tight end 13, Douglas, wide receiver 43, Booty, wide receiver 48, and then Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver 60. They mentioned last week how they kind of like a wide receiver rotation they've been using in practice. They want to kind of utilize that more moving forward. And it seems like the three wide receivers I just mentioned are kind of who they're talking about. They are not pleased with the production of Jalen Polk. And after last week's game, when Kendrick Bourne looked pretty good, you have to think he's going to see the field a lot more. As you can see, none of these guys grade out as amazing plays, but Miami is capable of scoring 30. They're capable of being explosive. May has looked pretty good. All these guys have a floor of like 2 points, but if you're in like a 12-team league with 3 flex spots, multiple or 3 wide receiver spots, multiple flex spots, if you're in a 14 or 16-team league, if you've just got a million players on bye, you might need a low-end play. Booty, Bourne, honestly not terrible plays. Bourne in particular, I know, is available in virtually every league. And I think he has like earned more snaps this coming week over Polk. I wouldn't be surprised if he came out, had like a 70% route share, and had a pretty decent game. So again, poor matchup. Patriots probably going to lose. But if they're trailing in the whole second half, if May can continue looking this good, they're getting a little bit of help in the offensive line likely this week. I don't know. If you're desperate for wide receiver, I actually wouldn't hate it this week. Then with Miami, little more straightforward. Achane Hill auto starts every week. Waddle, boom bust in the flex, but he's had like 0 good games since week 1. You can't really feel that good about Jalen Waddle. Njoku, Tua, basically just streaming options. Depends what you have. I sort of hate playing Tua because you know the running backs are going to run for at least 1 touchdown. He has nothing with his legs, so you need at least 2 passing touchdowns from him, and you know that they're probably not going to throw for over 300 yards, so it's a little tough to see any sort of ceiling from him. And then Jonnu, he's up to the 10 and 8 on the season, but that's thanks to like 2 good games. He's probably going to have like 3 to 5 receptions. You're basically just crossing your fingers, hoping they utilize him in the red zone. He scores a touchdown or they breaks off a long play, but that's pretty much what you can say about every tight end. So 3 to 5 receptions, that's not terrible at the tight end position. He's a fringe top 10 to 12 tight end this week. Next up, we've got Cowboys at Commanders, 45-point total. Commanders, 10.5-point home favorites. Oh, how the turntables for the Dallas Cowboys. On the Dallas side, not much is overly appealing. The Commanders have pulled like a complete 180, honestly, on defense this season. Remember, late last year into this year, it was like start every wide receiver one against them and you're getting the best game of their career. They are now a negative matchup for all pass catchers. They've allowed the 5th fewest passing yards per game. They're generating sacks at the 7th highest rate in the league. This is not a defense we're looking to attack. CeeDee Lamb remains a must start. Rico this week, probably a volume-based running back too. Not a great play, but on the week, you're probably playing him. Other than that, maybe you can stream Schoonmaker. I don't even know how you say his last name. Maybe you can stream him as a lower-end option. Don't expect the same production that you got last week. Overall, I wouldn't be jamming Cowboys players into your starting lineup. They're projected to score 17.5 points for a reason. It's not a good offense, and most of the production is going to flow through CeeDee Lamb in the ground game, and it's not like there'll be that much production. So I don't trust it. I really just wouldn't go outside of those two this week. On the Commanders side, it's a great spot, right? Like you're more than 10-point home favorites against a defense allowing the 6th most yards per game, the 2nd highest EPA per play allowed. You can beat Dallas however you want, but it's easiest to do on the ground. That is music to the Commanders' ears. They will have no problem exploiting this defense on the ground. Jaden Daniels, Brian Robinson Jr., they're must starts. McLaurin, Ertz, I would say they're strong starts, and then Eckler is like a low end 2 to flex play. Again, in a week with 6 buys, I'd feel pretty good about starting all 5 of those players. Then if you're in like a tough spot, right? If you're like, Nick, I would definitely be starting all those players. I have nothing. I have nothing I can start in the flex spot this week. Noah Brown, currently my wide receiver 51. It's a revenge game for him, against his former team. He's actually out-targeted Terry McLaurin in 3 consecutive games, so hasn't been efficient, hasn't posted a good game recently, but not out of the question that he'll have an okay day this week. Wouldn't feel terrible about starting him. Next up, we've got Vikings at Bears, very low, 39.5 point total. Vikings, 3.5 point road favorites. I thought when I saw that line that there would be weather concerns. As of right now, there are not. Maybe some mild wind, maybe a little chilly, but overall, it's a fall day for football. The total is that low because both teams have a really strong defense. Both offenses have shown signs of being really good, but also signs that if they play a team that has a good game plan, they can be stopped. For the Vikings, only running backs have a positive matchup against the Bears. Again, the Bears have a very good defense, especially when they play at home. It's at least like basically neutral for tight ends. I would say Aaron Jones is always a must start. But for the desperation crowd that's like, okay, thank you for the Noah Brown. Is there any other name, maybe at running back, we can lean to? Akers has touch counts of 14 and 12 over the last 2 weeks, and it hasn't really been because of blowout. It's been more because Aaron Jones not only a little banged up, but also it's like, well, he's always banged up, right? He's always getting injured. Maybe they're utilizing Akers a little bit more to keep Aaron Jones healthy. They trust him. He hasn't been great, but if you're looking for, let's just say 10 to 14 touches, mostly on the ground, and you'd be okay with that running back 2 this week, Akers, not a bad option. And then, hey, he's one of the highest upside. There's other upsides, or the other running backs that have a little bit more upside, but he's one of the tier 1 handcuffs because there's a non-zero chance that Aaron Jones does go down with an injury. So you can not only add him to just get a few points at running back 2 this week, but there's also that contingent upside if something does happen. After that, obviously you're starting Justin Jefferson, Sam Darnold, quarterback 12, Hawkinson, tight end 11, Addison, wide receiver 37. I'm not really expecting a very big game from the Vikings. I think they'll do good. I think they should be favorites. I don't know that anyone on this team is, besides Jefferson, obviously, I don't know that anyone in this passing attack is going to go out there and have 70 and a touchdown. They'll need a busted play. They'll need a mess up from the Bears defense, and the Bears don't really screw up that much for pass catchers. So all fine. All can be used. Maybe just limit expectations for Vikings players this week and limit expectations for all Vikings players this week. Then for the Bears side, the Vikings are a terrible matchup for running backs, but a positive one for wide receivers in a very similar way, not exactly the same way, but a similar way as the Lions. The Lions have a better pass defense. So again, we said with the Lions, everything gets filtered to the wide receivers. So even though they're highly efficient against wide receivers, if they have a billion targets, it's like, okay, well, you can only limit production so much. Less so for the Vikings, but it's still the same thing. They're not bad. They're like league average at defending wide receivers. It's that a lot of targets get funneled that way. And so even if you're league average, you give up elevated fantasy numbers because there's so many targets in that direction. Last week was definitely a step in the right direction for Caleb Williams. If he plays that well again, we're going to gain a lot of confidence, and I think he plays the Lions next week, so maybe we can start starting him then. I don't feel amazing about starting Caleb Williams this week. I have him and Mahomes. I'm starting Mahomes this week. I still want to give it one more week of Caleb doing well, and a lot of his production did also come on it was 9 carries for 70 yards. We can't expect that every week for Caleb Williams, so I want to see it again for Caleb, but again, a positive sign with the new offensive coordinator last week. Hopefully he does play well again, though, and we can get another decent day from DJ Moore, from Rome Odunze. They got pretty solid volume. I don't think there's anything that's going to save Keenan Allen this season. He's been terrible, but Moore, Odunze, I think they played well enough last week where I'd feel pretty good about using them as like low-end 2s, maybe in the flex spot. Cole Kmet is the same as every week. He's out there a lot. He can luck into a touchdown. If he doesn't score, you're probably going to be sad, but again, Swift, terrible matchup, but he's been playing really well, and if you have a ton of buys, you kind of have to play DeAndre Swift. Don't expect a lot from him, but Moore and Odunze, I think they can have pretty good games, and hopefully we can just wait one more week on Caleb Williams, start him after that. Final 1 o'clock game is going to be Chiefs at Panthers. okay, 43-point total. Chiefs 11-point road favorites, so a lot of those points are coming on the Chiefs side, which is a pretty high spread, given that the Panthers are coming off of bye and are the healthiest they've had all season. For the Chiefs, a lot comes down to Pacheco's status, obviously. I don't think you can use Kareem Hunt. Even if they say Pacheco will be limited, I don't think you can use Kareem Hunt much this week. If it's like, okay, Pacheco's going to play 20 snaps, or Pacheco's going to get 7 touches. Like if they say it's going to be less than 10 touches for Pacheco, okay, you can play Hunt as a low-end running back too. If they're like, he's going to have a decent workload at all, I just wouldn't play Kareem Hunt. Not going to be involved in the receiving game. My guess is they use Pacheco at the goal line. I don't know. It just wouldn't be that great. But again, it's a smash spot for the running game. So if you had to do it, this would be the week. This is the final week where you can use Kareem Hunt. But again, my lean is play Pacheco, don't play Kareem Hunt. This game, honestly, to me, it sets up like a spot where Kansas City wants to prove that they are one of the best teams in the league. And it's like everyone knows that they are, but they've been hearing all season that they're super overrated, one of the more overrated 8-0 teams. I think they got to 9-0 as well. One of the most overrated undefeated teams that long into a season we have ever seen, right? Like they were super overrated. They've been hearing that over and over and over again. Then you go into Buffalo, a big game, one of your first big tests, and you lose by 9, right? And you don't look that good. I feel like they have this week, they're just like fired up and they're like, we need to drop 30. We need to drop 40 points on this Panthers team. So again, I'd start Pacheco if he plays. I'd start Mahomes. I'd start Kelsey. They did try to make it a point to get Worthy more involved. I think they continue doing that. They also just missed on 2 deep plays. One, I don't know how Worthy didn't get his feet down for one of them. For another one, I don't know how Mahomes didn't get the ball out sooner because Worthy was wide open. If either of those or both of those hit, it's a very different day for Worthy, but I'd probably play Worthy. I'd probably try and get DeAndre Hopkins into the flex spot. Like, again, I think this is a spot where KC scores like 4 or 5 touchdowns. They have not looked good, but I think this is a bounce back spot, a statement spot for them. I would be playing players on this team. If it's close, play a Chiefs player this weekend. Then for the Panthers, we finally get to see Jonathan Brooks. We don't have any sort of report yet on the usage. They said he's going to play, but I don't know how much. I'll see what the report is. I'll adjust the rankings accordingly. Realistically, though, it is the worst possible matchup. You do not want to play running backs against the Vikings and the Chiefs. So I probably would not play either one of Chuba or Brooks. But again, thin week. If you were like, Nick, it's them or it's like Ty Chandler. It's like, okay, well, Ty Chandler's not going to touch the football, so you have to play them. Don't expect good things for the Panthers rushing attack this week. And honestly, no Panthers player grades out good. There are a lot of question marks with these running backs and what the usage is going to be in a terrible matchup. Thielen's likely back at wide receiver, so that room is a mess. You're not starting Bryce Young. They're not really utilizing, like, I guess maybe you could go to Jatavian Sanders if you get Tommy Tremble out. But other than that, like, there's just nothing to like on the Panthers side. 4 o'clock games kick off with Broncos at Raiders, 41-point total. Broncos 5.5-point road favorites. For the Broncos, Bo Nix has been awesome, and they're expanding the offense around him finally. He's got at least 30 pass attempts in 4 straight weeks, multiple touchdown passes in 3 of the last 4. He's grading out as a top 10 quarterback option right now. Really good option to stream this week. Behind him, it gets thin pretty fast, even if we expect decent production. Sutton is a poor matchup, but he's a wide receiver too. You're playing him. After that, who do you trust? Veal, Humphrey, Franklin, Mims, they're all part of a huge committee as like 4 wide receivers after Cortland Sutton. They're using 3 running backs, and we don't know who the hot hand is going to be. None of the tight ends average more than 3.6 expected points per game. Even if we think Denver does pretty well offensively, other than Nix and Sutton, it's just like it's very difficult to trust any one of them. Then for the Raiders, it depends on the news you get for the running backs. Like the running backs are potentially appealing, right? Zamir could be appealing if you got Madison out. Madison could be appealing if you got Zamir out. Maybe Abdullah is somewhat appealing in a deeper format if you're desperate, if both Madison and White are out. But I don't know what's going to happen yet because I haven't seen any sort of update there, so I'll adjust the rankings accordingly. Realistically, if you're at least okay, I still would not want to be starting any of these running backs, but we'll see what the projections say once we get the status on these guys. Basically, play Myers and play Bowers. Bowers as an auto start at tight end, Myers as a flex play. Myers This is his final tough matchup of the season. After that, it's a great matchups rest of the season. But he already played pretty well in this matchup before. He's going to have a pretty decent role in the offense. So I'd still be good playing Myers, but he's more of like a wide receiver 25. And then I think after this week, he's a top 20 wide receiver rest of the season. Again, play Bowers, please. Next up, we've got Cardinals at Seahawks. Decently high, 47.5 point total. Seahawks, 1 point home favorites. For the Cardinals, they've been great in recent weeks, and they're coming off of bye. So I would expect them to play pretty well. Kyler, Connor, McBride, all must starts in my eyes, while Marvin Harrison Jr. is like a low-end wide receiver too. He's been good. Like I promised you, the underlying stats are showing that he's going to be a great wide receiver. They're just doubling him at a crazy high rate. And basically Kyler's like, okay, if you're going to double him, I'll take off. We'll give it to Connor. We'll give it to McBride. Like they've just been hyperly efficient as of late. I think if a team pushes them, which, I mean, realistically, Seattle is a 1 point favorite. Like Seattle is projected to push them this week. I think we can get an explosion spot for Marvin Harrison Jr. I think you got to just be playing him every week. He's too talented to keep on the bench. I know some of you have asked about Trey Benson. You're like, I need a running back too this week. Benson be getting some production. He's not projecting that well because a lot of the production in the last 2 weeks is because they're crushing teams. And Connor's been a little bit banged up. So it's like you don't want to overfeed Connor. You're winning by 1 million points. You know, you're playing really well on offense. Yeah, throw Trey Benson in there for more touches. If Connor's more healthy coming off bye, if this game remains close, I would expect Connor to have a pretty strong workload. He's a great play this weekend. I could be wrong. Maybe they use Benson a little bit more post-bye, but I would not feel great about using Trey Benson this week. Then for the Seattle side, Ken Walker, DK Metcalf must starts. JSN entering that conversation as well. He's been the most featured wide receiver over the last month. And while a lot of that is due to that nuke game when Metcalf was out, he still had 10 for 110 last week with Metcalf back until he cools off. I think you have to just keep playing JSN. After those three, thins out pretty quickly. You can't trust Charbonnet. Lockett's only a wide receiver 46. You're just praying for like a big player touchdown with him. Gino's the only other one I would trust. And I do think he's a pretty good streaming option this week. Didn't have a great game last week. And there is risk that if Arizona keeps playing well, they get up, they'll play slow, they will run the ball, they will drain the clock. So that could be bad for really everyone in Seattle, but mostly Geno Smith. But I think he's playing well enough. And with Metcalf back, again, I know the production wasn't there last week, but I think he's a good play as a high-end quarterback too this week. Final 4 o'clock game is going to be 49ers at Packers, 47.5 point total. Packers, 2.5 point home favorites. For the 49ers, it's a tough matchup. You're on the road against a really strong Packers defense. I think the offense is consolidated enough. Again, no Ayuk rest of season, must-win game for San Fran. Because we know exactly where the ball is going, they're not going to use secondary players all that much. I think that kind of overcomes what is a very poor matchup. Assuming Kittle does return, I think you're starting Kittle, McCaffrey, Purdy, Debo, and Juwan Jennings all this week. Debo has been frustrating, and realistically, Juwan is the one they're using as a top wide receiver. There's a reason we spent a number 1 claim on him, even when we knew he was injured with a hip injury. He's going to be awesome rest of the season. Like, you're just starting him every week, every matchup rest of the season. Even with that being the case, Debo has a higher ceiling than virtually every wide receiver does. So I think you got to just keep playing him. Like, he could easily go out there, have 3 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown, 5 receptions for another 110 and a touchdown. There's just not a lot of wide receivers who have the ceiling that Debo does. So if he's out there, you're playing him. You could play Pearsall if you're pretty desperate, but ideally you're only playing Pearsall if Kittle is out. And again, I don't think Kittle's going to be out again this week. Then for the Packers, Jacobs is the only must start. Reed, great play at wide receiver 2. Love coming in as my quarterback 13. He's a good option as well. It's a poor matchup for wide receivers, and we do know that the Packers are going to spread the ball around a lot to all their 4 strong wide receivers. Any one of them kind of a big game, but you're going to have limited volume if 4 wide receivers, a running back, and a tight end are all being utilized on offense. I've Reed in 2 of 3 leagues. I'm playing him in both of those leagues. If I had Watson or Dobbs, I would probably be using them in the flex spot as well. You just have to understand that, especially with those 2, but really with all of these players besides Jacobs, they all do have a low floor because the offense is good. the matchup is tough, and there's so many people getting production that if they don't score 4 touchdowns, which, I mean, they're probably not going to do this weekend, it can be tough for a lot of these guys to get there. And then for Kraft, also a poor matchup, really needs a touchdown. He's a touchdown or bust, tight end too. Sunday night game is going to be Eagles at Rams. High 49-point total. Eagles 2.5-point road favorites. The Eagles, pretty simple. The Rams have improved a lot on defense since the start of the season, but it's a dome game. It's an elite offense on the other side. The total is high. And while the Rams have improved on defense, they're still not elite. Hurts, Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, all must starts. Everyone else can be benched. I know we're going to get 1 or 2 down games from those 5, but all carry too high of a ceiling. It's too good of a game environment. I don't want to bench any one of them. If you had like another top 5 tight end, sure, you can bench Dallas Goedert. If you've got 3 strong wide receivers, sure, you could bench Devonta Smith. I'd feel pretty good about starting all of these guys. I know that recently some of these guys haven't really hit, but it's a really, really strong game environment. This is a game that could go, 30 to 34. Of course, it get on the low end as well, but there's a lot of upside here that I'd want to be playing Eagles players. Then for the Rams, tough spot, but again, it's a dome game. You can lead offense on the other side. The total is high. It's a condensed offense. Eagles have a really strong defense, but you're starting Kyren, Puka, Kupp. You're benching everyone else. Monday night game. It's going to be the game of the week. Ravens at Chargers, 50-point total. Ravens 3-point road favorites. You've got the Ravens trying to avoid the wild card spot, one of the better wild card teams you'll ever see, against a Chargers team that is really as hot as they come right now. You've also got a Ravens defense that can't stop the pass against a Chargers offense that's been crushing it through the air as of late. This game has massive seeding implications, but also massive MVP implications for Lamar. For the Ravens, relatively simple. Lamar, Henry, Flowers need to be in starting lineups. Bateman's my wide receiver 32. Mark Andrews is my tight end 11. The Chargers do have a very good defense, and so you're going to want to stick to the core here. My gut says if it's close, I want to be playing players in this game because I think this has really strong shootout potential, but I would not consider Bateman. I would not consider Mark Andrews must starts. Their volume is very sporadic, especially with likely back. You don't really know what you're getting from Mark Andrews. And then Bateman could easily have 2 receptions for 40 yards, not score. These two are just too reliant on big plays and touchdowns. I'd prefer it was, a week where we had all of our starters and you didn't have to play these guys. But on a thin week, I get it. If you have to go there as a tiebreaker, I do want someone in this game, but I'm not trying to force these two in my starting lineup. Then for the Chargers, Herbert, Ladd, must starts. Please be starting them. Dobbins, my running back 20. I think on, a thin week, you're probably playing Dobbins. Quentin Johnston's my wide receiver 27. Will Dissly, tight end 8. The Ravens are a smash matchup for opposing passing attacks. That is because they're so difficult to run on. So again, going back to Dobbins, he has enough touchdown equity where I think you have to play him, enough touch equity. I think you have to do it. Don't expect a lot of production from Dobbins this week. But again, such a good spot for this passing attack that if you really needed to go to Joshua Palmer, I think he's like my wide receiver 50, somewhere around there. He's not an amazing play, right? Like he's probably not going to do a lot, but there's a lot of upside for this Chargers passing attack. I would want to be playing players on the Chargers this week. So please subscribe to the channel if you are new here. It really helps me out. And make sure you check the rankings later in the week. I do more updates as we get news, as I do more research. They will become more accurate later in the week, so please check back there, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That'll do it for this one, though. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you all on the Friday Underdog video.